around us. And so the question really is, how can we then adapt ECOWAS in light with some of the trends that we've been seeing in recent times? How can we then adapt ECOWAS to respond, or adapt even nationally, domestically? What can we adapt, and what can we prioritize and deprioritize to adapt to the changing world around us? So I think I'll just really start by maybe just summarizing some of the trends. I know I don't have a lot of time, but maybe I can start with summarizing some of the trends we've seen in West Africa, at least, for instance. I don't know, when I found this very funny. When I came in the morning, they're missing gaps in the line. I think that definitely represents a withdrawal of Mali, Chad, and Niger, the Sahel states over there. I think maybe the fourth is probably Cabo Verde. But very, 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 very obvious representation visually of a recent trend, which is what we might want to now consider as Alliance for Sahel states and an ECOWAS, existing at the same time within the same geographical region. And so what does that mean for regional cooperation for things like peace and security, considering, for instance, that Nigeria borders, the Sahel states, some of them, not to mention on the other side of the continent is Central Africa. So you have the Sahel region and the Chadian basin also touching Central Africa. That also is seeing increasing insecurity with the conflict in the Central African Republic, the conflict in the DRC, and etc. So what does that mean? But then this is definitely something to consider in terms of reimagining how we do diplomatic engagement and how ECOWAS functions as, through its peace and security operations. Something else would be, illicit extraction of resources. I mean, this is something that we keep talking about over and over again on the continent. The Sahel leaders have been very vocal about the cross and illicit extraction of resources from their regions. And same likewise in Nigeria, where we have pipeline tapping, or in Ghana with gold, and we're losing billions. Each of these countries are losing billions. And I know ECOWAS in the past has passed some policy instruments on guidelines for mining that is supposed to be, streamline mining processes within the region. But we have issues with implementation. We have issues with compliance as well. And so then when we start thinking about the future and how much is being extracted from the continent, from the region, in this way, then it's a matter of, okay, are our systems really enough? I'll just now move maybe very quickly to what's going on in Africa, and then just highlight something that's going on in the world. In Africa, some of you might already be aware, is there's renewed energy within the African Union system for reparative justice, for historical injustices, including colonialism, apartheid, and slavery. And we must know that West Africa, particularly as a sub-region, was one of the most affected by transatlantic slavery, and the DNA tests from Africans in the diaspora almost always trace their roots to West Africa. Never mind loss of cultural heritage from Togo, Benin, Nigeria, Ghana, you name it. And so when we talk about restitution, we talk about reparations as a priority for the African Union. The African Union this year appointed 2025 as the year of reparations and renewed action for reparations, and has now also extended that mandate in June, the upcoming decade, so it will be 2026 to 2036 as the decade of reparations. And so within West Africa as a geographical bloc, considering our history of being severely impacted by the historical justices we're talking about, and for young people's access to cultural heritage and access to their future that was essentially stolen through what happened in the past, what can ECOWAS and what is ECOWAS doing to prioritize or to reprioritize the reparations agenda in line with Africa's trend and move towards reparative justice? And lastly, and I know I'm really, really running out of time, so I'm just going through everything, would be just one to highlight what's going on the global scale: aid cuts. The people in DC, well, the man in DC, at least, with the closure of US aid, essentially plunged Africa, and West Africa in particular, into a public health crisis. For instance, ARVs that were heavily subsidized as a result of funding coming in from the United States suddenly stopped, which put millions of Africans who are on HIV and AIDS medication at risk. And so now governments are now trying to look inwards and trying to find new funding sources, Never mind, and I mean, you want to couple that with, the general move from the global north to now to the move towards the east. When we talk about China, we talk about Russia. And so funding is a big issue. And when we talk about the future and forward looking for the continent, our development, and I know we don't necessarily like the word development. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ruth, and we are definitely coming back to you because you asked a number of questions, and maybe they were meant to be rhetorical questions, but you are going to be part of that agenda actively going forward. So we are going to be coming back to you for you to give us specific guidance to create the roadmap. Right. So I know you'll be up to the challenge. So I'm coming back to you, Professor. Now, you feel, of course, very strongly about the agency and contributions of women. As a historian, do you think enough has been done to document and record the contributions of women in our communities? And if enough hasn't been done, what are the implications for how we take this agenda forward? Or what would you like to see placed on the agenda for member states of ECOWAS as we move forward, if we are going to be building a stronger house?
Très bonne question. Vous savez, je pense que ce que j'appelle la rupture à un moment donné, c'est que les sociétés africaines.
The microphone is breaking. Can the speaker change our microphone? We are unable to hear properly. Thank you.
Donc je disais que
I was saying earlier on, this issue is of importance. For very long, ECOWAS, in its evolution, has seen a lot of discontinuity through all kinds of acculturation that came from the patriarchal system, which was different from what was existing in the African continent. It is the monotheist religion that are the basis of it, and the colonial system and the system that was based on patriarchal system. And there are some changes that took place between men and women and the redistribution of power relations. What happened? There has been another major change thanks to colonization through the introduction of currency, extensive agriculture that will require technology, and the school that was in favor of boys and left women in the lodge, whereby the women were left in the traditional place. And where men progressed, women did not enjoy that. So what was the consequence? We had enormous consequences. We have enormous disparities. There's also the fact that the collective memory in general was excluding women. Meanwhile, back in history, I explained earlier on that women, what role women have played in the past. But more especially, women have played a front-runner role in the various traditional kingdoms, the Wolof, the Ashanti kingdom, even the Nigerian kingdoms. Women were in power and in the transmission of power as well. Better still, women played a very important role in the resistance towards colonial rule against forces that wanted to take. You have what happened in the Senegal. You have the queens, the Jallo queens, and the we also have all these feminine figures. In the course of history, you can see later on women were, disappearing from historical sources. We must give back to the African woman its rightful place in history so that the collective memory should take on board that dimension. That's the first step. I can recall when President Champas was here, women and General Sheikh Dera, we asked him to create the gender center for us, and that plays a very important role. We should not just stop at having the gender center. We need huge funds to build that Africa that we are missing as time goes on. And we need to reconstruct the historical source and give women their rightful place. This is important. How do you want us in building peace that we require, that important female figures are not appearing? There are the mother of Sunjata Kanta, for instance, and all these women who played a so important role, even his sister. All these women who are icons. We need to build the history of our region with those women. In all our societies, we can find them. Let me also say something that is quite fundamental. I am inherited what we have, the generation of Presidents African with Senghor, Alioune Diop, Cheikh Anta Diop, and all these intellectuals. CODESRIA is playing a very important role in all of this. We need to rebuild this strong intellectual movement that have brought Africa into the forefront. We have 50 years of Frantz Fanon. I was reading some of his stories that are extraordinary. We need to build that bridge with the diaspora. In all this period, we didn't have Francophone Africa, Anglophone Africa. People built an intellectual movement even among Portuguese-speaking countries. In England, the first conference of intellectuals was organized by Kwame Nkrumah. And let me close by saying this. And then we had these conferences. There was no division. We need to come back to that unity. So that we have that strong intellectual movement to change our countries. In these strong ones, the figure of the women is not seen at all. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. I know if we leave you, you can go on till tomorrow morning about this topic, which you know is very close to your heart. It's close to mine too. So now, Simon, let me move into what might be considered to be difficult waters. But hey, this is a forum where we are free to express ideas and ask difficult questions. We might not have the answers, but we should ask them anyway. Now, in your earlier presentation, you described how way back then, the African leaders who fought for independence in many of our countries were young people, young men and women. And now here we are in 2025. We seem to be in a situation where our leaders keep getting older and older and older. And age is not a bad thing. We need wisdom, we need experience. That's not the problem. The problem is when, one, the age of their age is not a problem, but the age of their ideas starts to affect the people they are leading. And secondly, the fact that they then cling to power with everything they have. So for example, a 92-year-old leader is clinging to office, and today someone, some cheeky young person, ran a list of the number of presidents. I mean, Nigeria is not perfect, but at least every 4 to 8 years, we have someone new. So some mischievous person ran a list of the presidents we've had in Nigeria way back then. Every 4 years, every 8 years, and then there's been this one president in this one country for the past 50-something years. So talking about things that are not fit for purpose and unsustainable, is this a sustainable methodology for leadership in our region or on the continent? Are we going to continue to see our leaders getting older and older? What is it that is making it difficult for leadership to have a new face on our continent or in our sub-region? Don't worry, you will be able to move out of Nigeria freely and get into Sierra Leone freely.
All right, thank you. I think those who know me, this is a very big bait, but I try not to take that. I think the issue you've raised is important. I'll come to that question. The first thing I also want to say before the question is that from my work, when we say youth, most of the time, what it means is that young men minus young women.
Yes.
Yeah? In Creole, I learned in Creole when I live in Sierra Leone that when they say youth man, then we are not talking about young girls. We are only talking about young men, for example. So there is always, for women, and I'm piggybacking on you, there's always a double bind for women in the African youth context, that as a young girl or young woman, she loses out because she's a woman, and then also because she's youth. Okay, but the question about our aging leaders is something that needs to be said. I don't know if I have the capacity to criticize, but I think it's important that we do talk about them. The important part of this question is that there is history. Whatever we are doing now has a future, has an impact on the next 50 years. So these 50 years that we have clocked, we have created knowledge, we are sharing knowledge. Are we prepared to share knowledge? And how are we going to share knowledge? The history is telling us certain things. Yeah? When you listen to Fela's songs, you will be hearing people's names from in the independence days of Nigeria until now. And those people are still governors or have very strong ties to presidency or governance from Fela's time. Listen to any of Fela's songs, you'll get it. So is history, are we recording history to learn so that we can share knowledge? That is the question to the House. Are we learning? The next ECOWAS, the ECOWAS of the next 50 years has blueprints offered to her. Is she willing to take those warnings, even with the ES situation? It's a warning to us that consistently, when A does it, you caution him, but when B does it, you do not caution them. And then people begin to feel that some people are protected under these organs, for example. So we have the blueprints. Do we want to learn? Are we able to use those blueprints to absorb the shocks that these next 50 years will be coming? The ball is in our courts. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Simon. I, asked the question because of some controversial conversations that people started to have around the kind of legitimacy the leaders of the AES states had and the attraction they had for young people in their countries who felt, well, this is one way in which we can, claim space, claim, leadership and, positioning moving forward. And we need to do all we can to ensure that that does not become the norm. That does not become the reason for us to now start jettisoning our democratic values and practices, no matter how problematic they might be. So, to you, Ruth, I want to give you an opportunity to finish, sharing the thoughts that you had, and I'm interested in hearing from you, because you posed the question to ECOWAS and other related institutions around how they can address the issue of resources. If resources that need to be invested in certain areas like health, education, and so on are being withdrawn or suspended, how can those resources be replaced? Where would those resources come from? I would like you to share your thoughts with us. Where do you think those resources should come from?
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think maybe I should start with that question because it kind of ties into some of the stuff I was going to share. I think that generally speaking, part of Pan-Africanism is, to start looking inwards and shying away more and more from looking outwards for stuff like funding. And I think post-colonialism or the post-colonial state development in Africa generally, or in the global south generally, has been heavily reliant on what was coming in from outside and less reliant on what was happening inside. And I think some of the practical solutions in terms of now looking inwards is probably, as a region or as Africans, we maybe need to renegotiate our relationship with taxation. West Africa in particular, I mean, in tax justice spaces, West Africa in particular is notorious for tax injustice. We might have the laws and the frameworks, but we necessarily do not really feel incited to implement them. Why? Because we are not tax economies. We are resource-based economies based on the oil and gold and diamonds and, every other thing, logging and timber that we are, thankfully rich in, but what the consequence of that has been, being less reliant on taxation and tax economies. And so what happens is multilateral corporations see West African countries and West African states as a place for tax breaks and a place, and even not even foreign multilaterals, even the ones on the continent, the ones from here, don't necessarily see the need of giving back to the community. So that's one, renegotiating our relationship with taxation. And we don't have to do it the Western way, right? Pre-colonialism and pre-colonial African history will tell you that there were elaborate measures of taxation indigenous to this region. And so perhaps it's time to bring that back. And we, of course, we need to do some research in this and see what we can take from the past and what we can take from the future and come up with a taxation system that works for us in a way that is effective, right? The only other thing I will say would be illicit financial flows, losses and monies lost as a result of debt, injustice, monies lost, taxation I already spoke about, corruption, asset expatriation in large sums outside of the continent. And I think the estimate, if I'm not mistaken, annual loss of illicit financial flows from the continent is 80 billion USD every year. And that's an estimate. I think 79 billion, but now maybe 80 billion. And I think maybe just would invite, because there's a report done by what we call the Thabo Mbeki report that was done in 2015 that really goes into details of how to combat IFFs and corruption on the continent. And I think if we had 80 billion being injected in Africa every year, what could we do with that? What could we possibly do with that money? I'll just leave that. So yeah, in terms of funding, it would be definitely finding alternative measures of funding, and just suggestions would be maybe renegotiating our relationship with taxation in West Africa, as well as really doing something and prioritizing our responses to illicit financial flows and debt, public debt and corruption. Just other things I was just gonna quickly say would be well, I'll just go one by one. One would be on the subject of reparations. I think that, I mean, the AU conceptual document on the theme of the year, and which again would be pushed forward to the decade of the year, specifically mentions the RECs, regional economic communities such as ECOWAS, and the role that they have to play in prioritizing reparations and reparative justice for their people. And I think more than any other region, and I don't want to, say why it's not Operation Olympics, and I don't want to say one region suffered more than the others, but I think more than any other region, West Africa should be at the fore of this conversation. ECOWAS should be at the fore of this conversation, especially when we start to quantify the amount of resources, human capital that was lost from this region in particular, when we talk about historical injustices. So a reprioritization or prioritization of reparative justice, restitution of cultural heritage, and actually framing reparative justice as a rights issue, a right for the youth, for the future of this continent to access their history and use that access to dream about their future, I think is something that will be very important and very key for the future. I wouldn't discuss too much about debt because I think I already talked about it a little bit. One other thing I will say, and I think probably this is the last thing I will say, would be bargaining power. And I think if we have this right, it could potentially be a response to some of the questions that I raised earlier when we talk about the extractive industries, when we talk about funding, when we talk about trade, when we talk about exploitation in international trade and global politics. And because of the trend that's coming from the global north with nationalism, with anti-immigration and et cetera, anti-aid and funding to the global south, et cetera, I think it is very, very important to recognize that a major cause of why we always, as a global south, as African, as West Africa, get the shorter end of the stick is because we have no bargaining power. And bargaining power can be gotten from diplomatic blocks and trade blocks. And I know we have ECOWAS, and I would hope and I would wish for ECOWAS moving forward for the next 50 years to really think about how it can organize itself as a trading bloc and as a diplomatic bloc. And just for instance, if we talk about just exports, just one example, shea butter. Right, which when people think about the companies that really make money off of selling shea butter as a skin product, they are not based on the continent. They are foreign European companies. And where is shea butter made? Here. Nigeria used to be the world largest exporter of shea butter for many years. And then the Nigerian government, I think as of 2 years ago, banned commercial exports of shea butter. And then the leading exporter of shea butter now, who took Nigeria's place, is Ghana. Now, the foreign companies that have been exploiting from this gap and this lack of negotiation power that we have as Nigeria, because the reason why the federal government did that was so we can develop the Nigerian economy with shea butter sale. Now, they just simply moved to Ghana. And so this is the same thing even with cocoa, right? Ghana stopped exporting commercially cocoa. But then you look at the airports in Africa, airports in West Africa, they still don't stock Ghanaian-made chocolates. You'll still find the Swiss stuff and the Belgian stuff. So yeah, coming together, and when one of us stands against something and when one of us stands for something, the rest should come together and stand behind them. And I think that would go a long way in giving us as a bloc, as ECOWAS, or as West Africa, negotiating power that would allow us to go globally and resolve stuff like, aid and funding. Thanks.
We have very little time, but 1 minute. Yeah.
Yes, so quickly on the question of our relationship with tax. I think it starts with our governments. I have a strong feeling that our laws and tax regimes are designed as punishment. Like you are criminalized before you start earning money. When you start a new business, you are assessed and you are missed. In some countries, you have to pay in advance. And when you don't reach the assessment, or you don't reach the assessment, you don't get a refund. So what's the motivation for me to pay tax, for example. So I think it's not just a question of who is benefiting or how are we losing money in terms of taxes to finance these projects, but also how our tax laws designed to encourage people to want to pay. I think that's very important in our thinking, especially for the young people, because our refusal to pay tax is it's in itself an act of revolution. You understand? An act of defiance. So if we don't design the taxes, when I went to Europe the first time and I set up a business, I got so much support, I was confused. The bank that I opened my business with gave me 6 months no charges. Then they had a package of graphic artists, website designers, whatnot, accountants that can help me set up. Where do you get this anywhere in Africa? No. So for 6 months, I had all of these resources that I could go to, and as a young person, build up a business and help other people. And so the way we design our laws and our tax system should take into consideration how do we work it so that people begin to develop a relationship that I want to pay tax because it comes back to me. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing that with us, Simon. So on this note, we are almost done, but we don't want it to seem as if we've just been talking at you and we've not given you an opportunity to respond. So can we take a number of questions, observations, and I've negotiated successfully with the coordinator that we will take 3. And he's going to choose which 3. Because I want to be able to smile at you guilt-free during the lunch break.
You know, you were talking about youth who are over 30 something. Any youth less than 30? Okay. So 1, 2, 3.
But you also need to then call an Imze.
So number 1.
Thank you very much.
1 minute.
Thank you to the panelists for such a very enriching conversation. Sometimes it's good to have these rocking the boats conversations to awaken us in Africa. I think for me, one of the things when I look at, where ECOWAS would be in the next 50 years, I think one of the things that comes to my mind is I first of all see ECOWAS as a pyramid. So we have all of these states, and the states itself individually make up that tiny architecture that contributes to the bigger. And I think I agree that one of our fundamental challenges is leadership. So when I look at that architecture, I'm looking at a system, an architecture whose systems and processes are strong and expansive enough to carry every member of the ECOWAS region along. And that phenomena should come from an understanding that no one is safe until everyone is safe. No one is successful intellectually, spiritually, economically in the sub-region until everyone is safe. And how do we do that? I think, again, when it comes to the youth question, the region, ECOWAS, we should begin to think about reimagining our educational system. I think that is fundamental. What kind of an educational system that is not just intellectual, but go back to basic, that takes us also to the cultural aspect. How do we raise an ECOWAS of the people, a people who can carry the African value? What is that value?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let's get the youth.
Thank you to the panel. Madam Moderator, when you mentioned a country where a 92-year-old was re-elected, I am from that country, and I hope I'll have freedom of speech after this. I'll have freedom after speech. So we are here today having this conversation on the occasion of the 50th anniversary of ECOWAS. And it's very important that the conversation is happening because elsewhere, like in the moribund regional grouping from which my country comes from, These kind of conversations don't even happen. And because we are in a world that is in constant flux, we don't need to wait for anniversaries to have these conversations. They need to be continuous. And I think it's the work of the Commission to make sure that they're incentivizing that these conversations happen. And when I envision an ECOWAS of the people and ECOWAS in the next few years, I'm looking at that and thinking after Benin, we will probably have Cameroon there someday. Thank you.
Thing I wanna
Can you use another one? That one doesn't appear to be working well.
this one. Okay. Thank you. I think that the issue is not the age of leaders, but the quality of leadership and how leadership is articulated to management and governance. How do you translate your vision into reality and deliver for the people? We have democracy crisis. I haven't heard about that. We have to restate the narrative of Africa. Ed is not the one developing Africa. I was part of the Secretary General report on domestic resources. And domestic resources are the one that is developing currently Africa. But we don't have the credibility of using our resources. We have so far sovereign fund, 1.4 trillion African sovereign fund invested abroad. If you don't trust your own country, how do you want others to invest in your own country? It doesn't work like that. Last point, I haven't heard as well here the major disruption that the world is going through. Artificial intelligence, I haven't heard about climate, I haven't heard about positioning of populism and other countries that is putting in jeopardy democracy. If democracy doesn't deliver for our countries, I'm afraid that we'll speak up to tomorrow, we'll not find the right way because we'll not implement for our people and they will get fed up from our lead.
Thank you. I can assure you that by tomorrow you will hear about AI. Yeah. Thank you. I'm just joking there. All right, so any other person who must say something? Okay, one. I heard a woman's voice. Two. Okay, no.
Conference facilitator, I will no longer be held responsible.
No problem.
For
just one minute.
Overrunning the session.
One minute for them. One here, one there. Quickly, 1 minute.
Looking at leadership from the perspective of peer-to-peer learning, you've mentioned about the fact that given your experience, the fact that you have found yourself in corridors that enabled you to engage. But what I see, as far as the youth movement is concerned, is that it builds up in terms of activism, but the what next is missing. And that what next requires some level of replicated quality of leadership, the agency of leadership, that enables the youth movement to go to answer the question of the what next, which requires some level of constructive activism. Sometimes you'll find that the young people are given opportunity to speak, to be able to present their agenda, but it fades away because they don't really know how to negotiate, and they also don't know how to dialogue, to be able to build their agency in such a way that they are able to achieve some of the needs and interests that the youth are actually clamoring for. So I think that the next 50 years should be looking more on how do we build that capacity of negotiation, constructive activism, and then build a critical mass of leadership, because that is very helpful.
Thank you.
To be able to balance what regional economic communities like ECOWAS is doing already in terms of instruments, in terms of providing the spaces to enable youth to be able to actualize their objectives.
Thank you. That is a very beautiful place to stop to present the youth agenda.
Okay, so talking about the youth, sir, so I think I'm representing the youth, sir. So as a Gen Z, can I go now? Okay, so I felt some of the youths do not even know what the ECOWAS is all about. And speaking about the advocacy of ECOWAS, is there a way of, like, you know, balancing this thing? So I think for me, because of what I do, I have some knowledge about the ECOWAS and other things. But like talking about ECOWAS to some of the youth, they don't even know what it's about. So I think, how can we balance this even before thinking of, you know, thinking about the, so yeah, how can we just balance this equation, like bringing more knowledge to the youth about ECOWAS and, like, you know, enlightening them about what they need to know? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to give our panelists a minute each to respond to the questions and observations from the audience. So I'm going to start with whoever is prepared to go first. Okay, Sam.
Yes. So I think first, the concern about the next step. I think one of the biggest constraints to the next step, what next, is the issue of how's the word? When they are co-opted. They are co-opted into the system. I don't know how to solve that. But if you look around us, the people we've always had hopes in to see that they are the next good people, they fizzle out, because when you look at the history that they write for themselves and the constituents from which they are from, they get co-opted into what we know as bad governance. So as somebody mentioned, the environment around us is very much important as to what defines the next step. And that has led to the fizzling out of what happened in Kenya. It will happen in other places. It happened with the Arab Springs, so the Arab Spring. So I think that is where people like us, all of us, need to begin to think seriously. And I think that's where the work some of us are doing around the issue of being youth is important, so that we can find exactly the philosophical, not just the development, but the philosophical issues that we need to bring to the table to push this agenda forward. Thank you.
Oui, je crois qu'un des problèmes.
I think that one of the issues we face in Africa is effectiveness and efficiency. And we need to know how to go about things. Today, we are talking about making the organization vibrant and to provide new guidance, and also to position this organization in line with its very existence as of today. And the challenges ahead of us, it is only at that point that we will be able to address the major challenges we face in today's world. I think today we cannot decide or talk about climate change or AI such that the organization can exist. It is only based on the existence of the organization and its capacity that this organization could reflect. I think in the future reflection, we will have some reflection on AI or maybe on climate change, but we need to ensure that our organizations can be sustainable over time.
Thank you very much. Just very quickly, on youth, I do agree, as a Gen Z myself, I do agree that there is need for grassroots engagement with youths. But I think my generation, we're doing very well for ourselves still. With social media, people are learning still. And they are able to organize, and with the Gen Z protests in Kenya, the NSAS protests here, and even other uprisings in other parts of the world like Nepal, etc. So I do think, yes, there is need to invest in grassroots engagement with the youth, the young people of this continent and the young people of the region. And closely related to that is something I was going to share, but I didn't have time, would be children. More than we talk about, we talk about youth a lot, but I think children are oftentimes left out of the conversation. Ongoing injustices against children, child trafficking, child soldiers, child marriages, labor trafficking of children, etc. So I think this is also something that we probably should prioritize. We must prioritize as ECOWAS for the next couple of years. And the last thing I will just very quickly say is that in terms of the conversation on age and quality, it's not about age, it's about quality. I think just very quickly, maybe a little joke that human beings, we're not cheese. We don't get finer over time. Some do, but I do think that biologically speaking, physically and cognitive decline. We can have that conversation, but just to say that we need younger leaders with more energy. Yeah, thanks.
When I'm with the young people around me, my sons, daughters, other people who look up to me as a parent, when it suits me, I'm just like, I'm young like them. And then every now and then I say, oh, but no, I'm an old woman. And they look and say, oh, really? Now you want to be old? Those who tell you age ain't nothing but a number, they want to sell you a product. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, this session was asked to look at West Africa over the next 50 years, a projection of key trends. It wasn't meant to cover every single issue and topic that is of concern to us as African people, as West African citizens. But what we seem to have agreed on from the sessions this morning and from the conversations on the panel is we would like to see a West Africa over the next 50 years where its citizens are secure, are prosperous, are competitive, are well connected, and those on the margins are no longer on the margins. Women, youth, children, people living with disabilities, and all those who are often excluded by accident or design. We would like to see West African states, in particular, over the next 50 years, have leadership that is credible, that listens to the aspirations of their people, and continue to uphold the social contract they are supposed to have with their citizens. We would like to see states where leaders understand the importance of political will so that all the normative frameworks, all the policies that are in place can be fully implemented and felt in the lives of ordinary citizens. We would like to see over the next 50 years West African states, and hopefully the rest of the continent, that are treated with respect, who have bargaining power, and are able to secure rights and agency for their people. And we would specifically like to see an ECOWAS that is still in existence. A complete house with many, many rooms in its mansions, all the rooms being used and functional, and all its children being present when it matters. So, for example, all the 50 member states of ECOWAS being present in this house, as opposed to us having, children scattered all over the place. We would like to see an ECOWAS that is still relevant, an ECOWAS that is better resourced, and that is connected to all the social movements that make it possible for its lofty ideals, its policies, and all the intentions that it has to make these relevant to ordinary people, particularly women and young people. And we would also like to see a sub-region whose history is considered to be important, sacred, and sacrosanct, and where knowledge continues to be created by our people, for our people, with our people, and for that knowledge not only be created, but shared, and if necessary, to be shared. So, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, your excellencies, I'd like to thank my panelists once again, and thank you for your contributions. And now we can bring the session to a close.
Thank you very much. A round of applause. While I ask the panelists to come forward for photograph, and please just listen to this announcement for the remaining part of the program. We still have one section after lunch. Lunch will start from now till 3:30. That's just about 1 hour, from now to 3:30. There are 4 points of service. So if you go, for those who are close by here, you can just go downstairs. There is a point of service. There is another point of service by the edge this way. So the leftists go this way, the rightists go that way. And then there is also another point of service at the edge there, where that young man is with white clothes. There is a point of service there. And then the panelists in the morning, there's another point of service just down by the road here, So please, it's time for lunch now. You can go for lunch. And please come back by 3:30 so that we can stop at 4:30 because we have a welcome dinner in the evening. Bon appetit.